There we go. All right, cybersecurity awareness webinar. And we've invited our IT people and Ben Schmerler to help us do this webinar and talk about cybersecurity, which in my opinion is probably the greatest risk to your financial well-being. Because if somebody, if somebody uses your credit card wrongly, the credit card company gives the money back to you. But if somebody gets into your accounts and wipes them out, there is no company that gives that back to you. You'd have to find the criminal and be able to go after them. So keeping yourself safe is critical. And we've asked Ben here. Ben, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Doing? Well, we appreciate you being here today and to help us understand some of the, important issues that we have to be addressing. So I know you're going to be running the slides, so you go ahead and start when you're ready. Give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Drew, and thanks for everyone for attending. I hope you find this information informative. We're not going to create a bunch of security engineers today, but I hope we can at least give you some tidbits to help protect yourself a little bit better. I'm the Director of Strategic Operations for DP Solutions, Inc. We're a managed IT services provider. So what does that mean? For places like the Financial Consulate and others, we act as the IT department. So we'll do things like not just the stuff you might expect, like deploy PCs, networking equipment, servers, et cetera, but also help patch their systems up, install secure solutions, advise for the future, so on and so forth. Myself, I have some background in security risk and compliance. Back in 2005, when I started in the MSP space, I did a lot of electronic medical records and billing system implementations, which, as you might expect, has a lot to do with private information, protecting it. So I sort of developed an expertise, not just in HIPAA, but in other data regulations and privacy concerns and security concerns. Additionally, I also work on our phishing and security awareness training program. We're going to talk a little bit about phishing today, which is a big threat for most average people, because as you'll see as we go through, most people, their threats are on themselves, honestly, and less on the technology they use. So we're going to get into that.
Right. The best thing you could do to protect yourself is understand what the hackers are trying to do to you and attack you, not your equipment. It's you they're after.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like the first point I put here is most attacks on the average person will have to deal with are on the user themselves and not the technology. So what do I mean by that? Imagine if this little robber guy who's here in the picture wants to break into your house. There are kind of two ways to do this. One is he can, break the door down, pick the lock, do something to compromise your actual security, your physical security. But wouldn't it be a lot easier if you handed them the keys and they just walked right in? Well, the truth is that a lot of the things that people are dealing with today are because they clicked the wrong thing, or they knowingly or unknowingly gave information to a bad guy, which was then used against that person to either compromise a system or commit some kind of fraud or ID theft or something like that. So, I mean, if I was to give one message to everyone here today, is that there are some tools you can use, and everyone should use cybersecurity tools. But a big part of this is being prepared yourself and having some good awareness and engagement so that you can be prepared for these threats. Yeah. So anything to add, Drew, to that?
Well, my wife is not very tech savvy, but I've got her to the point now that any email comes in of any sort, she's always asking me, is this legitimate? Is this legitimate? And so she's really got a great attitude toward always checking. Is this, she doesn't touch anything unless she knows that she's asked if it has any even curious thing about it.
Yeah,
so that's what we're after today.
Absolutely. And the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is phishing specifically. But
I love phishing.
Well, yeah, you probably love some phishing, right? But you don't probably love pH
I spell
phishing.
It different.
Yeah. So what's phishing? You may have heard of this before, or maybe you heard someone talk about it. Phishing is the act of sending fraudulent messages from trusted entities in order to get you to do something you wouldn't otherwise do. So let's say, for the sake of argument, someone wanted to pretend to be me, and they sent Drew a message, and they said, "Hey, Drew, Ben here. I'm really worried about this security incident on your system. Make sure you click here and tell me what, some information about yourself, or download this tool that I have for you to fix your computer. And Drew, thinking that Ben is trying to help him, goes ahead and clicks through that. But really, I'm not Ben Schmerler. I'm some guy in Eastern Europe looking to cause trouble. That essentially is what phishing is. Just like, the phishing most people know of, you're putting bait out there in the world to get somebody to snag it and fall for your trap.
They can actually fake your email address coming into me. When I look, I could see your email address as if it's you, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to sort of mask where these things are coming from. And sometimes you don't even change the email address. Sometimes what they'll just use their own email address or some fake email address, and then they'll just title it as Ben Schmerler. Or they might do something called spoofing, where they actually try and manipulate an email system to think it's something coming from me. Those are a little bit more sophisticated. And sadly, the barrier to entry to this stuff, and I think it was in a previous slide, is pretty low. Bad guys purchase kits from the dark web and
on Amazon.
Well, you know what I said? It's kind of like if people are familiar with like HelloFresh or there's meal prep kits. Think of meal prep kits, except cybercrime. That stuff kind of exists on the web. You buy this thing, and now you know everything you know to be a cook. I mean, a cyber criminal. So anyway, sort of getting to phishing, what you can do about it. You just got to be aware of what's out there. And some of the things I see today are COVID scams. People, I actually started doing phishing tests this month, telling people, hey, click here to find out your COVID-19 vaccine location, because that's something a lot of people are interested in right now. I started running these tests, and indeed, after I started running these tests, I find out that the number one phishing scam in January of 2021 was COVID-19 vaccine scams. These criminals like to prey on fears and anxieties, the things that we care about. If you think about anybody in your life, we all have something that we really care about and can be exploited. So what these criminals are looking to do is essentially take that thing you care about. Maybe it's a family member that's in the hospital. Maybe it's a financial situation for you. Maybe it's getting the COVID vaccine, who knows, or a shopping thing for Christmas time. And they send you a message that ramps up your urgency, that makes it so that you feel compelled to click through, and you don't think about checking where it came from, or where the link goes in the email, or that they're asking you something unusual. You just click through because you care about the subject matter. So you have to sort of be mindful of this stuff, because we all have our own personal vulnerabilities, and that's really where phishing comes from. Anything to add, Drew? You want to? I'm always curious of your perspective on it.
What I do is anytime I get an email that says something like that, or even if it says Schwab's got your latest statement, click here. I don't use the email to click on that. I go to the web and I say, oh, I hear that there are vaccine sites out there. Where are they? And the Google search will say, here they are. Forget that email. I got something out of it. If it was legitimate, this Google search will bring it up legitimately for me.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it. Whenever somebody is asking you to do something that is very serious in nature, handing over financial information, handing over personal information, clicking on something that may be a little strange to you, or you're just not comfortable with, this kind of validation, maybe it's picking up the phone and calling somebody. If for example, Drew sent something to me and I said, that's a little strange, I'm not sure if that's really Drew. If I have Drew's phone number, I can call Drew up and ask him, did you send that email? Was that something that comes from you? Maybe he was compromised and someone's taking advantage of his machine. We don't really know. We're
kind of validate. A lot of emails like that in our company where they say, hey, Drew, can you do a quick task for me? Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's all it says. Can you do a quick task for me? And it looks like it's coming from Mike, but it's really not.
Yeah. And this, again, understand all of these things. They're coming to you. They're trying to focus on you, the user. There's not a lot of things that stop this stuff from coming in. And then once you click through, you volunteer the information, you fall for their trap. It doesn't matter what technology you have behind the scenes, because you've given people what they want. It's that simple, unfortunately. So we have a few examples I thought I'd share, and Drew's going to be my little test subject, I guess, for right now. But you in the chat, if anyone wants to chime up, I pulled a few examples of phishing scams. So why don't we go through this and see if there's anything here that sort of sticks out and points where you could identify this as a phishing scam. So Drew, what do you see?
Well, one, there's an attachment and a link there, so that immediately scares me.
Absolutely. So notice on the end of this link, just as one example, this is, it says COVID-19 update. It's not telling you what the update is for COVID-19 in the message. It's not writing this email and saying, here's the update for this Teshin company. I'm not familiar with what their background is. It doesn't say all that information. It says, hey, click here to go through. And by the way, you might notice it's a .html at the end. So it's asking you, what it's really going to start doing is collecting information on you if you click through.
Second, it may not have been written in Russian, but it looks like somebody with a Russian accent might have written it.
Yeah, I mean, not every scam email is going to have
They're
such
getting better now.
Poor language, but you can see like infected has a space in the middle. Coronavirus is written like it's a virus within a beer as opposed to one word. It's not it's the virus in your beer, not the coronavirus. You can see document is capsed and there's weird spacing. Even things like it's from information unit. There's just weird stuff about it. Let's go. I brought up a couple other examples, so why don't we go to the next one here? So what strikes on this one? What do we see on this?
Again, you got another link down there.
Yeah.
But now this one's really cool because it actually does seem to have a .gov email, which would make you feel, wow, this is the actual government.
So that's spoofing. They're pretending to be sending from a cdc.gov email. Obviously, there is no CDC-COVID-19, I believe, as an email address. So one of two things is happening. Either someone is tricking the mail server to thinking that that's the actual email address it's coming from, or that the person's email address was compromised. That is a possibility. It's not like the government is immune from this stuff if you read the news. You brought up the link. So if you look at the link down there, and you can see there's a little graphic. If you hover over a URL or something to click through and say Microsoft Outlook or some other email client, if you hover over it, it'll tell you the link it actually goes to.
So wait, hold on a sec. When you say hover over, I know what you meant. You know what you meant,
Sure.
But I bet you there's 50% on our call that don't know what hover over means.
Sure. So let's get into that. So I hope people, if they made it to this point, know how to use a mouse pointer. So you got your mouse pointer on the screen, and you go to, in this case, where the link is at the bottom, this HTTPS in blue, the cdc.gov thing. If you just bring your clicker over it, you don't click it, you just bring the clicker over it. What usually happens is it will pop up that little square, the little rectangle you see at the bottom. I wish I could highlight this without moving the slide deck forward. And what you see in this case is the actual link it takes you is not cdc.gov. It takes you to this weird healing-UE223 whatever garbage website, which has some PHP thing, something that's either going to install something on your computer or maybe trick you into volunteering information. So yeah, I mean, that's the big one on this. Another thing to look out for, depending on your spam filter, you may notice on this one in the subject line, it says external at the top. That means it comes from an external sender. Now, of course, for the CDC, it's going to be an external sender there, unless you work for the CDC. But let's say Drew, he brought up an example earlier where someone on his staff asked him to do something. Imagine if that person on his staff had a tag on their email that said external. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why would somebody within my organization have an external tag on their email? So that may be applicable. Not so much in this example, but just a little tip in the future. Anyway, I have one more example to share and then we'll move on. So here's a World Health Organization one. This one's a little bit more straightforward, but what do we see here?
Well, you got to click on the safety measures. And again, if you take your mouse and just let that cursor hover over it, it'll tell you where that link's going to take you.
Yep. And so very similar, again, more coronavirus scam stuff. It's everywhere. they'll bad guys will take graphics. It's super easy to do, to put a World Health Organization logo on your email to make it look official. I sent a phishing test email last December to a client, and it was free Starbucks drinks, and I just took all sorts of Starbucks graphics that are widely available and sent them out. It's so easy to do. Um, so something to look out for. You could even see also the one weird thing too is even this email address. They don't show the domain on this example, but you could see this weird exchange -cpress -adms -usr. I mean, nobody has an email address like that. That's clearly baloney.
I just recently got an email from AOL saying, and I have an AOL email. One of my emails is an AOL email, and it said there's going to be some issues, and if you don't fix this, it's going to be a problem. Well, click here. Here's some things you can do. Da 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 da. I spent 5 minutes searching this, ultimately to find out that it was legitimate. That
Yeah.
AOL does and is telling you, and it's legitimate. But I still won't click anything in that email, even though I believe the email is from AOL. I'm going to just do it externally.
Yeah, it was pretty wise to do that too, because there's another reality, which is that unfortunately sometimes certain companies don't always use the best practices to communicate or send emails. And, a lot of businesses will say, "We will never ask you for this information." We will never ask you for your password. I think you probably are familiar with that, if you've ever if you ever signed up for something. Um, but even then, sometimes these companies, they don't maybe format their emails right or something like that, or maybe they make a big ask they've never asked, that they've never done before. These are sort of like PR mistakes, I guess you could say. But you just got to be careful. It's better to check. The truth is that in the little bit of time that you check, if you imagine the alternative, if it was bad, digging out of these holes is so significant that the little bit of due diligence that you put in really makes a difference.
Yeah, and this social engineering now is a really difficult topic. It's one that's really active right now.
Yeah, totally. So social engineering is another side of this. So these are, we're talking a lot about cybersecurity, but social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate people into revealing sensitive information for fraudulent purposes. So it's usually one step towards the next crime. Maybe it's to actually engage in a more sophisticated cyber attack to actually take systems down, but oftentimes it's used for things like ID theft. So some examples: eavesdropping. Literally someone could be sitting, maybe not right now, but imagine sitting in a Starbucks or an airport. Someone could just be sitting there listening, trying to pick up what you're saying on your telephone, or looking at the screen on your computer to try and pick up information that is just sort of out there because they're looking over it. If you have a cell phone, you're probably getting a lot of scam phone calls right now. I think pretty much everybody does, getting these calls from sometimes obviously illegitimate things, where somebody says, "Oh, your car's warranty is up," or something, dial it to learn more. Or sometimes maybe something a little bit more convincing. Usually what they're trying to do is take your information so they can commit some kind of crime with it by doing engaging your trust. You should really limit your information you share in general to watch out for this, and you should be mindful on what you're working on. So if I do in the before COVID, I used to travel a lot, and I had to be mindful. If I had my laptop and I'm in an airport and I'm waiting to hop on my flight, I probably shouldn't be working on client security assessments or sensitive work like that. It's one thing if I'm creating a PowerPoint like this, where if somebody reads my PowerPoint, the sky doesn't fall. But I probably should be mindful about the sensitive stuff I'm working on. If I'm on my
Or get on the public Wi-Fi at the airport.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there are ways to do this safely, but you have to be careful about it. And in
Yeah.
general, just like I think it's just not wise to do specifically sensitive things in public spaces. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Same thing for talking on the phone. I mean, you don't know who's listening publicly.
So we do have a question.
Oh, please, yes.
Mikey's going to read the question to us.
We keep getting phishing emails stating a service we ordered in the past was just auto-renewed and our credit card is being charged. The email states that you need to call back if there's a question or a problem. The first time this happened, we called back. The sender wanted access to our computer. Of course, we declined and hung up. The question is, should we block senders like this, or should we let the emails continue to arrive so we have some idea of how much info they have about us?
If you can block it, you can. I have a lot of thoughts. This is a great question. There's a ton of things to go over with it. So first of all, part of this is like cold reading. Does anybody, I'm sure people probably remember that the psychic guy, Edwards, who would, I forget what his name is, but he would have that TV show and he would say, I'm thinking of someone died and their name started with a T. And someone says, my grandma is named Teresa and she just died. Oh, okay. Well, obviously that's it. Some of this stuff with phishing is like cold reading, right? They're saying things that are kind of generally true and they don't necessarily apply to you. Another example besides this renewal thing for a product we used to use, probably a common product, probably something that lots of people are using, I'm guessing. But one scam that does something similar to this is you'll see these phishing emails. I see them all the time where they say, hey, we know what you've been doing on your computer and your boss wouldn't like it if they knew what websites you're going to or what you're doing on your computer. You've got some really, strange tastes and things like that. And of course, the person on the end is, oh my God, they know what sites I'm going to, or that I know that I went to Amazon when I was at lunch at my job. These things are so kind of universally true that they're designed to try and make people think that you have information on them when they most likely don't. To speak to the broader point of the question, what should you do about it? Deleting, blocking the email, absolutely. Once you catch on that this thing is not legitimate, you should block it. It sounds like you caught on when you made the phone call that they were trying to get more out of you. They used the email as the first step to engage with you and say, okay, we got them to pay attention. Now get them to call us so that we can get a foothold in and maybe install ransomware or steal money or do whatever they wanted to do. Whenever the thing is to do is to block it and also communicate. So let's say this is within your company. You might say, hey, we've been getting these weird emails from so-and-so telling us to renew stuff. If you get an email like this, notify the IT department, let us know, communicate with your team, make sure people are aware that this is coming through. So, if you don't fall for it, that's great. Make sure the next person doesn't fall for it. Stuff like that. There is a culture element to this as well, where you have these open channels of communication and people are engaging with each other. So this is a really great question. I'm glad it got brought up.
And we have another question.
Ben, do you think the Echo Dot / Alexa is dangerous for confidential phone conversations being overheard?
That's another interesting question. So these personal assistants, the Alexa versus Siri, I guess, is Apple.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that Amazon Echo, and I need to be careful because I have an Amazon Echo in my home. I don't want it starting to talk to me while I'm on the call today. That happens sometimes where it says, oh, you're asking me a question? My understanding is that Amazon does keep some of that voice data that you say. So they're not going to be listening into your phone calls. That's just like a Bluetooth headset. Amazon's not picking that stuff up. But the things you say into your Alexa, I need to be careful, it's going to hear me. I got to be quiet. The things you say into this unnamed thing, it will record, it will pick up. How dangerous is this? Moderately. I mean, it depends on what you're saying. Chances are the information is not going to be used against you. But I think this speaks to the third bullet point. If you don't need to share sensitive information or something personal about yourself, don't share it. There's just no point. We're all
what if you're sitting in your room and a friend's over and you guys say, we ought to make a trip to Cancun, and Alexa's nearby, and next thing you know, on your computer, there are trips to Cancun showing up as advertisements.
So this is the other weird thing about it is, and probably I don't know if you're going to get this so much from an Echo, but you're going to probably get this from Google, for example, because Google is taking the information you give to it, and then they're basically using it. And Facebook does this too. Social media websites do this, where they're taking this and they're saying, oh, Ben was searching for Cancun all the time. Let's send him all sorts of Cancun stuff. It's going to be ads for him. These are fairly innocuous things in the end of the day. I mean, they're just trying to advertise to you. But unfortunately, the things we put in to the system, social media, web browsers, Google, et cetera, a lot of these services are free. They don't charge you money, but you are the product to them. I think somebody asked me one time, hey, Ben, would you pay Facebook money if they could make a more secure platform? Would you pay them $2.99 a month to use Facebook? And I was like, are you kidding me? Facebook should be paying me. They're using my information and they're selling it, which is fair, I guess. They're trying to be a business too. But all this stuff is commoditized. And so there are two things that can happen with this. Either it can be breached or used against us. Someone could take advantage of us if we're giving it to the wrong person. But more to the point, it's going to be used against us. So it's really to our benefit as individuals and consumers to just be mindful that the more we put out there, the more it's going to be used either to advertise against us or to be used against us in a cyber attack.
It's true. What else do we have, Ben?
All right, so I'm going to keep moving forward because I think we touched on the social engineering stuff. I think it's really important. We've talked about a lot of these social elements, but let's talk about safe browsing and computing, practices we can do to make sure we maintain our systems. So, viruses, malware, and ransomware could lead to significant downtime or costs. There's also legal liabilities depending on what kind of data you have, et cetera. So make sure you limit what applications you install. So like any free applications, this extends to your cell phone or whatever. I'm trying to show my phone, but it's getting blocked by the virtual background. These things may monitor your data or actively harm your device. Think of the hundreds of thousands of apps that are in the Apple Store or the Android Store or whatever. They're not scrubbing all of these apps. They don't get to the motivations of these companies who publish these apps. So I'm not going to say don't use apps. I mean, I use apps all the time. But just understand that there's a contract that you have with these people, essentially. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart most of the time. You also need to make sure your devices are updated. So Windows PCs, Apple PCs, your iPhone, your iPad, your tablet, even the smart devices in your home, make sure that they get updates. You might have a fridge in your home that connects to the internet now. That's the crazy age we're living in. If it has the ability to update itself over the web for security updates, you behoove it to yourself to make sure that those updates, especially because most of the time they're automatic, get done. If you don't know this stuff yourself, make sure you get a knowledgeable person to help you out with it. You probably want to use a paid antivirus, anti-malware tool. There are free tools that are okay, but obviously Bitdefender, WebRoot, Norton Antivirus that you pay a small subscription fee for is probably better. These are higher quality products that are going to block more threats. If you have a sensitive account, a bank account, maybe it's, for example, if you ever are doing your taxes online or your brokerage accounts, or even sensitive accounts, maybe they just have personal information you care about. Maybe it has nothing to do with finances whatsoever. We all have sensitive data. You should utilize what's called multi-factor authentication if it's offered to you. Drew, are you familiar with multi-factor authentication?
I do it on almost everything that I have. So
Great.
You put in a password, and then after you put in your password, it sends something to your phone. You get another digit and you put it in, and that's the only way you can get in.
Absolutely. So that's one example. Sometimes it's an app you install on your phone that gives you a code that generates automatically. Sometimes it's an email that goes to your email account that requires you to click to verify. But the point is, it's something beyond a username and a password. And it's a much more effective way of securing accounts than just the username and password before, because it requires something that only you have access to. So consider doing that whatever you can. And if they offer it to you, it'd be best to utilize it. I know for some people, they get a little annoyed by that stuff. But again, the annoyance of multi-factor authentication is much less than the annoyance of a serious cyber incident.
Yep.
You should still use complex passwords and change them regularly. We have a complex password guide that I have a link to here. It's too much for this presentation, but we can share that with the audience. And your devices and products must be supportable. So what do I mean by that? Windows XP, which Microsoft has sunset as a product, really should not be used for sensitive work. The product, when a product loses its support from a vendor and stops getting security updates, it doesn't mean that that people aren't finding ways to exploit it. In fact, the longer it's out of support, the more threats that are going to be unpatched are going to be out there. So we have to make sure we have supportable devices. If you have a router or a computer that you've been using for 10 years, it's probably worth making sure that it's still a supported device. And if not, upgrade it. You don't have to spend a lot, but use something decent that is getting vendor support right now. And I think we might have a question, but.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ben, do you agree that if you get a warning text from your bank about like an alert, that you should call the number in the text or just call your bank directly?
I would call the bank directly. So this is another scam that's popping up right now. I would not rely on the number in the text. I've seen to myself, and I don't have a Wells Fargo account, but I get a text that says your Wells Fargo account has been compromised. Well, I don't use Wells Fargo, so it's obviously not a scam, but it gives you a number to call. And I'm sure lots of people fall for it. If people weren't falling for it, they wouldn't send the texts. Do not use the information. Use the information that's publicly available on the web. Contact the people you know through the channels that you trust already, which means the phone number on their site, the email address that you have on file for them. So that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We got a second question, and that is dual multi-factor authentication available for the Financial Consult app?
Mike says yes.
It can be set up to be used with your phone number. Just ask your relationship manager.
Right.
Your cell phone.
So just call your relationship manager and we'll set up multi-factor for you if you haven't already set it up. But you know, Ben, this one about devices and products updated is near and dear to my heart because our clients are usually fairly well off, and yet they've got computers that are 10 years old. Their Apple iPhone is the Apple III, you know, and I'm like, you know, come on, just upgrade it. Spend $500 or so. Get the latest technology. Get the latest support.
Look,
this will protect you.
I'm a big nerd. I like nerdy things. I enjoy computers. It's a fun part of my life. I've been doing it my whole life. I understand people don't have necessarily the positive relationship with technology that I have. Some people just use it out of necessity. I get that. But the truth is that we all engage with technology now. A lot of the work we do or financial planning or retirement stuff we do is done through electronic means. And we owe it to ourselves to protect our assets, just like we do with other, sound investing and stuff like that, to use the proper tools. And that means using a fairly modern machine. It doesn't mean going out and buying a $3,000 computer that is top of the line. It means a supportable, decent product. And the barrier there is much lower, even if you're concerned about the money.
Ben, what do you think about biometrics for security?
I got that same question yesterday. So the biometrics are cool. I think for most people, they're overkill. So
why don't you explain biometrics?
Oh, okay, sure. So biometrics is when the authentication is biological in nature. So the so-called retina scan, you've seen in a slick movie.
Star Trek.
Yeah. Oh, we've scanned his retina. We've confirmed that it's Ben Schmerler, or he swiped his finger over this thing and we've got his fingerprint. These are great things, but a couple of things to consider. The cheaper products are not foolproof. The more expensive products are expensive. I think a better option for most people is probably just the username, password, and multi-factor authentication combo. That usually gets the job done. Any kind of security product, whether it's biometrics or anything else, it's all kind of a return on investment thing. So how much does it cost us to deploy it and install it and maintain it? And what is the net benefit? And the truth is, for most people, biometrics is more expensive and not value producing enough right now. That could change over time as the products get cheaper and better and it becomes more obvious. But I think for most people, they don't have to worry about that at the moment.
Yep. No more questions right now, Mikey?
One person did ask if the two-factor can be enabled for both the website and the mobile, and when we enable it for either, both are then enabled. So you'll get a text message with a code you'll need to enter before you go into our website or into our app.
As it should be, by the way. We want to make sure that every channel that someone authenticates through has that authentication. And this applies, you're talking about your financial consult stuff, But think about this also, for example, like a Microsoft environment or a Google environment. We don't want somebody to be able to use multi-factor to get into, say, Google Mail, but not to get into Google Drive. That wouldn't make sense. We need to make that across the board, for the entire product whenever possible. Like, granted, there are some technical difficulties at times.
For the average individual, what you're ready to talk about now is something that probably most do not do, and most should do. All businesses should be doing this, but the individuals typically don't do this. So let's get into this.
Great. So protecting your data from loss. So data is an asset, just like money or anything else. We need to figure out how we can protect it from loss. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we set up all our security, we have good awareness, et cetera. We still need to create some kind of backup or sort of a fallback in case the worst happens, especially for the things we care about the most. So the first step in this process is identifying what's important to you. I can't tell Drew what matters to him. Only Drew can identify that. Drew can say, this is the information I care about. This is why it matters to me. And by the way, there may be information I don't even know about, trade secrets, personal information that is just private to him that he doesn't want getting out, whatever it is. Everybody needs to come up with what I call data classification. That sounds fancy, but all it is saying, this is a list of the things we care about, and this is where it lives, right? Once you identify that stuff, we need to identify some kind of backup or storage solution that speaks to that need, okay? So for me, for example, I keep a lot of pictures, personal pictures, nothing crazy, in Google Drive. If some of those pictures were really sensitive, what I probably want to do is take some kind of copy of those and put them in a totally different solution to back that up. I don't want to get too into technical solutions because those are going to vary based on what we're trying to accomplish. But you could trust me when I say that there are solutions to back up data no matter where it sits. What you need to do as an individual is identify that and then work with a technology professional or a vendor to figure out how to protect it.
Now, your Apple iPhone and your Apple iPad, as long as you've enabled it, typically is just going to automatically update to the Apple cloud, right?
Right. So
But
a lot
your
of
Microsoft computer, your laptop computer, which is Microsoft driven, you have to initiate some form of backup.
Yeah, so Microsoft offers services too. If you wanted to go straight through Microsoft, there are things like OneDrive that you can utilize. That's like a file service, and they'll back up data for you if you want.
Only if your computer's younger than 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft understandably will block that stuff because they need to be able to provide a secure service. And so if they open the service up to any platform, no matter what it is, then they're kind of taking on a risk. And they don't want that. And so they are going to do some limitations on that. And you don't have to use Microsoft. Let's say you're using a Microsoft PC and you're like, I don't want to pay Microsoft for this. Well, as I said, Google Drive's out there. You can get 100 gigabytes of storage from Google for $2 a month. And you could put files in there if you're really concerned about them or something like that, and just create some kind of redundancy. Again, the specifics are going to vary from person to person, but what you can do as a person is find out what I care about and what the impact is to me so that the solutions can sort of dictate themselves.
Let me ask you a question, Ben. Do you think that the average individual, the average Joe who's really not doing much more than surfing the web, looking at email, doing social media and things like that, do you think there's even a need for a laptop, and can they not just go with an Apple iPad or something of that sort, which is a lot easier to do a lot of this security stuff than a Microsoft?
Certainly. I mean, yeah, fundamentally it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? For me, I couldn't get by with just a tablet. I do too many things that require a desktop or a laptop PC. It's just the work I do. But my stepmom, for example, we got her an iPad fairly recently. She was a little resistant, I think, but we got her an iPad recently, and it's all she uses. And she does email and Amazon and her banking and pictures and stuff like that. She's retired. She has all this stuff together, and an iPad's perfect for her for these things. Maybe she can't run a bunch of high-end games like I do or whatever, but she doesn't have that need. There's the beauty of where we are today, and thank goodness we're in this time, with the work from home and COVID stuff, where we do have a lot of choices for technology, and it's just a matter of where that that product fits.
Yeah, good point.
Anyway,
I mean, go ahead. Mike's got a question,
oh,
Ben.
go
Hold
ahead.
on.
Yeah.
Any thought on biometrics on your phone?
Any thoughts on biometrics on your phones, like the Apple face recognition and fingerprint, et cetera? Et cetera?
So you'll have to excuse me because I don't have an iPhone personally. I've heard that the face recognition stuff is kind of not perfect. I'm not saying don't enable it. I mean, it could be helpful. You probably should use some of the more traditional things because my understanding is those things do kind of sketch out. Even the thumbprint thing, like you can smudge it and stuff like that. I wouldn't make it the only way to authenticate a device. You might find yourself locked out of it. But I wouldn't I would say if you can enable it and you like using it, by all means, but it shouldn't be the only way to log into those devices. It's just an easier way to secure them, right? It's great when you could just pick up your phone, it looks at you and then you log in. But just the only warning is that might not work sometimes. Someone,
Right.
maybe you're wearing the wrong pair of glasses or you're just got your hair cut or something like that. Those things do trip up these kind of cheaper biometric solutions.
Or you have a face mask on.
That's right. You have your face mask on and it doesn't recognize you. That's a great point.
Right.
I didn't think of that.
We have another good question, but just a quick thought on that. My good friend of mine, his 8-year-old son can open his iPhone because their faces are so similar.
See, exactly what I mean. So it's useful, and like if I grab the phone, it probably wouldn't recognize me. But you can see these are still kind of young technologies, I think.
So there's a really good question that's about companies that consolidate your password and username information. I think there's 2 brands of this. One is where a password manager. The other is kind of the data aggregator where it's screen scraping. There's also a question about financial consulates use, which I'll answer after you go ahead.
So should you use those tools like a LastPass?
What's the risk?
What's the risk?
So first of all, the risk is the company that you're working for itself, right? We need to make sure that if we're going to use a password management solution, that we're using a trusted vendor that does the right things with that. We're putting a ton of trust in them. The good news is that to even get into these lines of businesses, there are back-end things like compliance standards, audits, et cetera, that these companies have to demonstrate to be able to work in the industries that they're doing, which makes things a lot more secure. Not foolproof, but a lot more secure. So if a password manager helps you to use strong passwords and authenticate, by all means do so. But that password manager solution should have multi-factor authentication on it. You should have some engagement with it. You probably don't want to let it sit too long. You want to make sure you're constantly looking at that account because that account is so powerful for you. And the device you use needs to be properly secured anyway, right? Let's say I'm using a password manager and then someone compromises my device and my password manager can put my password into any website that it wants to. Well, now somebody has the keys to all of this other stuff, which means we have to really focus on the device. So a password manager is useful, but it's one part of a comprehensive strategy.
So the same question answer asked a question about financial consulates password aggregator in our website. So to answer that question, the tool we use on our website is called Yodlee. And the interesting, unique feature of Yodlee is actually the background data aggregator for all the other financial institutions. So when you're putting in your username and password to allow data to flow to our website, what they're actually doing is authenticating that it's you because they actually already have that data. Now, that is not necessarily always true. There may be some users where Yodlee is keeping your username and password and going somewhere else to get the data. But a lot of that data is already on Yodlee's platform. They're the largest platform for financial transaction data in the world, which is the reason why we use them.
Right.
That's great to hear.
So ransomware, hostage rescue. We actually have had a client that his computers were locked, encrypted, and obviously you had that big Baltimore city school system ransomware. We also knew another law firm had their computer system encrypted. What do you do?
GBMC had a ransomware thing. So that's a very complicated question, but fortunately we have a little guide for it. This PDF here, either we could copy the link into chat, or if you want to follow, my contact information is going to be on the next slide. You can reach out to me. I can set you up with it directly. This is like sort of a guide for you, and maybe you could use it for your business. You know, maybe you haven't come up with a ransomware management plan or some kind of procedures. If you look through this, it gives you the basics about what you could do to respond to these incidents. So it might be a good resource for you and help get that conversation started. So we wanted to share that today. It might be helpful to the audience.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
And it happens more than people realize.
Oh, it happens all the time. I mean, we deal with a lot of clients, and honestly, it's a numbers game. I mean, just like, unfortunately, just like COVID-19, just like other sort of things that happen to a certain amount of people in a population, it's sort of inevitable that someone's going to get hit, even if you're doing the right things. This is why I need to be prepared for it. We can reduce risk by doing good things and having good behaviors and using right tools, but something could still happen, which means we need to be prepared to respond to it,
Right.
to make those incidents as painless as possible.
We have
So,
another question.
Sure.
A question and also a financial consulate specific answer on that. I should have made myself a co-host, Drew.
There you go. Would have been great. Here you go.
No, you're fine. I'm good. Just as far as our clients go, if they end up having a identity theft issue, our team has developed an internal document, which is a process we'll run through with the client, trying to secure the custodial accounts and secure some other aspects, secure our website. So if you ever have that issue, definitely reach out to the consulate right away, and we can try to help with that. Generally, if you have that happen, use multiple sources to contact us. Send emails to the people that you know here. Leave us a voicemail if it's after hours. The other question we have is, the person has a question about their Verizon router and the security that it provides. I think what they're asking is, what should they worry about using a router from a provider that basically has the stock settings in it?
Yeah. So first of all, you can call your ISP and you can discuss directly how your router is set up. They sometimes are good about it and sometimes they aren't. And I'm just being perfectly blunt. It's kind of a crapshoot. Me personally, so I actually use Verizon, so I can use myself as an example. I set up my router so that it just passes traffic through, and then I have something behind it so that like the network behind my internet connection is my own. So even if the router's compromised, I've got another layer there. That's kind of a high-end solution. What the average person should do is they should contact their ISP. If they have an old device that's been sitting there for a while, ask them, I'm concerned that this device has been sitting here for a while. Is this still a supported product? I need to make sure. You can come up with any sort of, if they are pushing back, you can give any kind of excuse you want. I mean, they owe it to you to put a supportable device in there, especially if you're paying them per month for it. I know a lot of these devices are leased, so they owe it it's their responsibility because you're paying them for it. But they should be able to tell you, we've locked out from other people. It is a supportable device. If it's not a supportable device, maybe it's a legacy device, they will send you another one. And they'll say, okay, here's a new one. We've got some stock settings. You just have to, usually it's something like you plug it in, you hook all the cables up, and then you call them up and they activate it or something like that. Again, it's all going to depend on the ISP. But if you're leasing a device from them, which most people are, they owe it to you to provide a decent supportable device. But I don't think ISPs are really that great about being proactive about it. Sadly, they should be, but they're not.
Does the average person need to use a VPN when using the internet from their home on a Verizon Fios network with a recent router?
Yeah. Great question. There's been a lot of marketing about VPNs recently. You probably see the commercials for NordVPN or ExpressVPN or any of these products. Let's be very clear about what a VPN does. So a virtual private network, or VPN, creates an encrypted path between you and a destination. Let's say me and Drew are talking and I create an encryption layer around it. That means that unless you know how to read that encryption, unless you have the Rosetta Stone, if you will, the key that tells you how to read that stuff, then this information can pass in code over the public internet from one person to another without easily being read. You could break encryption, but that's very difficult to do. VPNs create that path across the internet where you send information. That sounds really good, right? But it's not a panacea. You could use a VPN and someone could still compromise your machine. You could use a VPN and some third party could breach your information. You could use a VPN and connect to a bad host, and then now you have a encrypted connection with a bad guy, right? What the VPN is doing is it's creating more privacy for your data on the public web. Now, even if you don't have a VPN, one thing I would look out for when you're about to send sensitive information, especially over the web, is look in the browser. Notice, for example, on this slide where it shows my LinkedIn at the bottom and it says HTTPS for LinkedIn. That little S is kind of important. That S means that there's some kind of encryption going between you and the destination where you send information to. That little S should pop up when you're logging into your bank account, when you're about to run your credit card on Amazon, all those sorts of sensitive information places.
There's usually a little lock there too, right?
Yeah, depending on the browser, there's usually like a little lock that says it's encrypted. This is how we can use the public web to send sensitive information. And we don't necessarily need a VPN for that. To the broader question, does an average person need a VPN? If you're really concerned about all of the privacy about everything you're doing, by all means, pick up a VPN. Or if you want to do the other stuff with a VPN, like watch Netflix stuff from Japan or whatever, you could do that with a VPN too sometimes. But, I know people do that. But it is, I think it's a little over marketed. VPNs are a valuable tool. They don't do everything, and they will not guarantee privacy. They guarantee privacy in some respects. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So we're our best defense, right, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. The phrase I use is you could be the biggest vulnerability or the greatest asset to your organization, right?
Yeah.
People who don't care will cause problems. That's just how it is. If you're burying your head in the sand, something's going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But if you're thoughtful and engaged, the risks go way, way down. Not just that, we could still fall for something, which is why we should use multi-factor authentication and other login protection, as well as the other maintenance and support things I talked about. This is all about being comprehensive, and security and risk management is a discipline. So I like to think of it like personal health. You should eat right, you should exercise, you should avoid unhealthy situations, and you probably won't have a heart attack tomorrow by doing that as a discipline, by doing that regularly. Are you guaranteed not to have a heart attack? Absolutely not. Of course, things could happen. Absolutely. You still have a risk, but your risks are lower because you've engaged in a discipline to reduce your risk. Security, cybersecurity is pretty much the same thing.
So let me ask you a question. A lot of times you are looking at something and you're scrolling through an article, and all of a sudden you see on the right these really wild statements with a picture there about, Tom Selleck, da 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 da. And, and you're like, wow, what happened to Tom Selleck? And, I have heard that those types of things can be very dangerous.
Absolutely. There was a statistic, I think it was something like 1 in 10 ads is malicious.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, you're reading a legitimate article and you're telling me that 1 out of 10 possible ads over there could be?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated, but Google and other companies feed ads into these websites, right? If you visit the New York Times website and you see a little ad at the top of the screen, it's not like the New York Times picks who's advertising on their site. They have a service and people pay different rates to appear on the New York Times site. It's kind of a complicated system. But the point is, there's not a lot stopping somebody from saying, oh yeah, I have an ad, except my ad goes to ransomware or a scam site or some kind of baloney or just an illegitimate company. It could be anything. Since there are so many websites, you can get these ads to appear. And by the way, you could disappear tomorrow. You get a few people to click and then you cancel your contract on your ad stuff. Those things can be illegitimate. So we should be very mindful of clicking on those ads. Sometimes those ads will do other things, like they'll talk about, oh, click here for your economic stimulus. Click here for to find out mortgage rates in your neighborhood. Click here to find out about the threat in your neighborhood. I mean, it's everywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah. We have another question, Mikey.
if I do have a VPN, do I still need to encrypt sensitive emails through, say, Gmail, or will the VPN take care of that? And there's a follow-up after that.
I would recommend still encrypting the emails through the email provider.
And he means password protect documents like attachments.
Yeah, I think it's still advisable to do that. Again, it would help, first of all, on the receiving end. Let's say, just in this example, one thing I could think of is, okay, we've transferred the sensitive document from point A to point B, and we've used the VPN to make sure that stuff's private. But what about the destination end? What if somebody has access to that person's account that shouldn't, and we want to make sure that they don't have access to that information? Well, if we've protected the document, then if that other person's email was compromised, then they still can't get into it, or at least there's a lower risk. So I think it's prudent to still do that stuff. The more sensitive the stuff you're sending is, the more you should do with it. And, we can't do everything all the time. We live in a world where there's always inherent risk. I don't want everybody to go over the top on everything they do. I would just say when you're doing really sensitive stuff, that's when you probably want to take those extra steps.
Right. We finished, Mikey? We got to let Ben go soon. All right. Well, Ben, that was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
It's my
And
pleasure.
now we've got a whole bunch of security engineers.
Yeah, so you guys are going to all come work for me. We know we need some people, some security people. You guys can all join up.
Y'all have to pass the test, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you have to get through me.
And you got to wear the hood and the glasses, too. Don't forget.
That's right. We put little stickers to say with little devil horns, like in the thing. If you guys want to reach out to me, you have any questions, you want to learn more about DP Solutions, maybe we didn't touch on a subject that interests you. We talk about a lot of technology things. Make sure you check out the website, send me an email. You can check out my LinkedIn. We put out a lot of educational stuff out there too. This is all free. So if you ever want, we talk about so many different things. Just feel free to check out our resources. We love to share with the community.
I'd like to just say that DP Solutions has been one of the best things our company has ever done in technology. You guys have been
Awesome.
Fantastic. Really have. And
that's great to hear.
That.
That's great to hear.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.